What's up, everyone? I'm Dub Jellison, and I'm here with Purdue President Mitch Daniels. Mitch, how are you?
Doing fine, Dub. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for doing this. So students are going back on Monday. That's when classes start, and we're in the midst of this whole COVID-19 pandemic. It's been a rough time for everyone, but how have you personally been handling it, and how much work has gone into getting students back and having students go remote last semester?
A ton of work has gone into it. Really, only a few of us will probably ever appreciate all the effort and investment and all the different tasks that people have undertaken to try to make it possible. And we're just going to have to find out if it is possible for you and your fellow students to keep moving ahead with a reasonable degree of the on-campus experience that we've always known. It's been a very interesting last few months. On the one hand, all that work and a lot of very new assignments for us all. On the other hand, so many things that we weren't able to do, that I'm used to doing and others are, but that aren't there. I don't have the on-campus events. I don't have sporting events. I don't have speeches and travel and things that used to fill up the calendar. And so very busy, but on a very different set of assignments. And the biggest change, and I'm really going to regret this because it's going to be this way for a while. You know, I've been able for 8 years spend a lot of time with students, with both undergrads and grad students, but it's been one of the great learning experiences of the job, been one of the real fun parts of the job, and I'm not going to be able to do that for a while. Can't go to the co-rec, can't go eat in the dining courts and the co-ops and places, but just one of the adjustments I'll have to make, and we all will, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Is it safe to say that it's probably your toughest, most difficult to navigate stretch as president of Purdue?
Dub, it probably is. And we have to worry that it'll become more difficult yet. I mean, the spring and coming to the conclusion that we had to suspend campus operations was no fun at all. It was a decision that was being made all over the country, and I guess that took a little bit of the sting out of it. Mm-hmm. As you and I are talking here, there have already been 2 or 3 schools that have tried to do what we're going to try to do and come up short, had to make some kind of a change. And so that's pretty sobering. But look, that's what, as far as I'm concerned, we were hired to make a great place for young people to come and learn. So this is what the job's all about. It just took on a new form when this disease got here.
Mm-hmm. And I think I speak for all Purdue students when I say that you guys have succeeded in that. Purdue's, I think, it's the best school in the country personally, but I might be a little biased. So you kind of touched on the two or three schools that have had to go remote, UNC and Notre Dame. So how can you look at how those schools approached it and learn from that so we don't make those same mistakes and have to go remote?
I just got off a very lengthy phone call with people at the top of the UNC system asking, for just that kind of information. What can we learn from this? And I would not be, particularly critical of anything that seems they did. If there was one thing they could have probably done better, it was have more space to, isolate and quarantine people while they got better, mm-hmm. Which essentially all their students have. But there and as I understand it, Notre Dame too, the single biggest problem is social activities off campus. The vast majority of students, I'm told, in both those places have been doing everything asked of them, but all it takes is 1 or 2 parties where people sort of cast the rules aside, get together indoors, no masks, and all that. and it can spread like crazy from a 1 or 2 or 3 events. And that's what happened. That's what brought UNC down, and what caused Notre Dame at least to step back for a couple weeks. So we've emphasized it. We're going to emphasize it even more. You're performing a public service if a number of students see this and understand that holding a party like that is going to be is considered as serious a violation of university rules as cheating or something, and you could be out of here. We mean business about it because we have to. The whole enterprise could be stopped literally by just a handful of events that seem like fun, but turn into new, as I say, clusters of this bug.
Mm-hmm. I think students need to you just need to buckle down for the time being and try to do the right things. I know it's hard. It's hard for me. It's hard for all the students to not be social, not hang out with your friends that you haven't seen since March. So are you guys going to be policing that a little more, the university and all that?
Well, to the extent we can, an off-campus party that no one ever hears about till it's too late, can't do much about it. But, we won't hesitate to go and ask people, please, stop now. But by then it could already be too late. This thing transmits very, very quickly. And but anyway, you ask a great question. What can we learn from the early experience of some of these other schools? And that's probably lesson number 1. I guess it's not a surprise. We speculated on it, but it's at least as big a threat as we thought it might be. And I just want to say, and I've said before, no one regrets all these restrictions and inconveniences more than I do. I really look forward to when we don't, and when we can change them and moderate them. But if the evidence didn't tell us they were really necessary, then we wouldn't do it. And I hope students understand that.
Yeah, I think the majority of them do. Obviously, there's some outliers. But I wanted to talk to you about, you kind of touched on it briefly before, the amount of quarantine rooms / beds that Purdue has. You said that was maybe an issue at UNC. So how many beds do we actually have, or rooms, or however we're doing that? And how are you guys approaching the quarantine? Like, where is it at, and all the details?
Yeah. We have close to 600 rooms, and we are looking still for more. The CDC has changed their guidance and now tells us 10 days is an adequate time. This is almost certainly true for healthy young people who typically are either have no symptoms at all or very mild symptoms, and probably data seems to be suggesting are less likely to transmit, the less symptomatic that they are. So, but still, we just can't know if we get a real outbreak at a concentrated period of time, whether we've got enough of them or not, enough rooms or not. Mm-hmm. There's also the issue of, and maybe the opportunity, for some students, if they're already living off campus, we're going to ask them to quarantine where they are till we find out that they're well or not infected. And as was raised in a couple recent meetings, a significant number of our students don't live very far away. Could be that they would want to go home for a few days until they're cleared to return. So we may have a little more capacity than it feels like, but one of the very first things we did in the spring when this whole thing became visible was to stop the planned demolition of some old units over at Purdue Village that we were getting ready to take down. They're near the end of their life, useful life. And we realized that maybe we better preserve them here for a while in case we needed them for some temporary housing space.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that kind of concerned me was the large lecture halls, such as like Lilly and Class of 1950. So if one person in that lecture hall, say a 10:30 lecture, if they test positive, would all 400 or 300, how many ever students are in there, would they be required to quarantine?
No, absolutely not. I mean, first of all, as you know, there'll be many fewer large lectures. Most of those, so many of those will be moved online. That's a good thing. But whether it's a larger or small hall, we have a really good system, we believe, for identifying through our Wi-Fi network people who were in close proximity. 6 feet is now deemed, in fact, they're really saying less than 6 feet is adequate spacing, but we're still using 6 for safety's sake, and duration. And so what really matters is what the professionals call medically significant contact. So passing somebody outdoors isn't significant. Mm-hmm. And even being indoors with somebody who is infected, if you're only there for a few minutes, or you're not within a few feet, and certainly if people are wearing masks, as they should be, those are almost no chance of transmission there. So the answer to your question is, if somebody does test positive, when somebody tests positive, we will look to see what classrooms they have been in. And if there are people who have been in proximity to them for a significant period of time, I think 15 minutes is what's being used, maybe it's less, we'll absolutely want to talk to them, but you wouldn't have to go to a huge number.
Mm-hmm. So that's safe to say, like, for example, my podcasting class, there's like 15 kids in there. So if like someone tests positive in there, then we'd all probably be required to quarantine.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, but.
Not necessarily. Again, we'll only do that where there's some reasonable chance that there was a medically significant encounter. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit glib to say this, but certainly it's a reasonable goal for us. I've been telling people for a long time now that probably one of the safest places to be in Tippecanoe County this fall will be in a Purdue classroom. Mm-hmm. It'll have been cleaned and recleaned and recleaned. The air filtration has probably been adjusted. The people in there will be spaced out and wearing masks. I hope everybody will abide by that. If not, there'll be a consequence. Mm-hmm. And it's certainly our goal that be a very safe place. Talking to the people at North Carolina, it's very interesting. They've had this big number now of cases. They don't find a single one that happened in a classroom. So, and they took similar measures. I'm sure they didn't take any more measures than we did. So these things are worth working on, but that is not where if we're going to have a great big problem, that is probably one of the least likely places it'll start.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to agree with that. So you talked about wanting people to wear masks. I don't know if there's technically like a mandate for that. I know you have to wear them like when you're in a classroom in a building, such as things of that nature. And personally, I wear a mask because I'm type 1 diabetic, so I'm technically more at risk.
Good for you. Yeah, you should.
And I've only been here since yesterday, but I mean, I've only seen like a handful of students not wearing masks, and they're all outside. Mm-hmm. So how are you guys going about ensuring that almost everyone wears a mask? Obviously, you can't make sure every single student is.
Of course, students have signed a pledge that says they'll do that, so they're violating that pledge and therefore a university regulation if they don't do it. Now, of course, it says indoors and outdoors where you can't have adequate distance. So I've seen the same thing. I'm very positively impressed, and I've been, running into students and thanking them. We're off to a great start in that way. But I will tell you this: the people in North Carolina said they had good on-campus compliance. They thought students arrived with the right intentions and did the same things that you have been observing so far here. And it wasn't good enough because of the off-campus partying problem.
Hmm. I think one issue that could come up that's kind of out of Purdue students and you guys out of our control is people coming in, people that live in Lafayette coming to campus. So are you guys trying to combat that at all, or is it just kind of everyone fend for themselves?
Well, it's not the latter. I mean, we do have a visitor policy, and certainly any scheduled event, people will pass through um, in essence, a version of the pledge themselves.
Hmm.
Um, no, though, you're raising a very important point. Uh, we're going to have worked as hard as we can to make the campus safe and to minimize the chance that a student either brings the virus here. As you know, the pre-testing, now we've got over 30,000 results, and then the incidence was 0.75, and that's a good thing. That means that uh, any positives that do come to campus probably going to be a very, very small number. Much better, by the way, than what they had in North Carolina. But um, we began to realize over the summer that at least as big a concern was not the campus causing infections in the community, but vice versa.
Yeah.
And we've tried to build a great relationship. I think we have with the county health authorities. They're doing a good job. The mayors have put some restrictions in place on bars and so forth. We've been talking to the apartment owners, trying to get them to do the kind of things that we're doing. It's very much in their interest to do this. And so you're raising a point that we think about a lot.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to transition to how COVID-19 is impacting Purdue sports specifically, because a lot of the economy around like West Lafayette and other places like Bloomington and college towns kind of revolves around the students and athletics. So how is that going to be affected here at Purdue? Obviously, Big Ten football is canceled. You guys have a plan for kind of winter and spring sports? Are you guys working with the Big Ten to come up with any solutions, such as like a bubble or something of that nature?
Well, I would say that first of all, nobody's more disappointed and unhappy about it than I am. Huge sports fan, especially Boilermaker sports. Not going to get into talk out of school about conversations that happened inside the conference, but eventually collective decision was made, as you know, not just football, but all fall sports.
Yeah.
And I just feel terrible about that outcome. So there's not yet a plan, but there's certainly a plan to have a plan to get back as fast as possible. I think it's even the day today, as we're talking, that they're announcing a committee across the Big Ten involving coaches and athletic directors and medical directors and others to try to get back to competition. I was proud of Coach Brom for stepping out and making a constructive suggestion early on, as he did, about how you might play football in the second semester. So let's just hope we can get there. But too soon to tell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So is there any plan in place as of right now for winter and spring sports, such as like basketball? I know there's some rumblings on social media and through the media about maybe there being a Big Ten bubble and then transitioning that to like a March Madness bubble. Have you heard anything about that?
Just those rumors. Really, I don't know. I know the NCAA says that now in probably 3 weeks or so, they expect to have some kind of a guideline out about basketball, but that's obviously the next big question. Mm-hmm. And I think people are hoping to learn something from the professional experience here. Not saying that could be replicated, it'd be hard, but maybe there are lessons that we can derive from that. But beyond that, I just don't know right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly an uncertain time right now, but So transitioning away from COVID, I don't want to have like a somber tone this whole interview. I want to talk about all the great things that you've done at Purdue as our president. I speak for all Purdue students. We all love you dearly. We're super fortunate and happy to have you as our president. So how did you kind of like what made you want to become the president of Purdue?
Well, it wasn't my idea. Honestly, I thought I was, when I finished my last job, my intention was to go back to business. I had a couple ideas and I was trying not to make a decision, but then the search committee came around quietly and I sent them away 2 or 3 times, but then I couldn't quite let go of the idea. And I guess it was, as much as anything, I started asking myself the question, aside from the job I was leaving, in what other job could I think of where if a person performed well and did a good job, it could make a more positive difference, certainly for state of Indiana and maybe beyond. And the longer I thought about the more I saw this as a real opportunity. And I've never been so glad for anything I decided to do. I've enjoyed every minute of it. Obviously I love the chance to interact with students and the things I learned from them. I believe our mission is a really great one that fits the times, that we teach everything here, but we teach some things really, really well in the STEM area and so forth that are so important to the future of the state and the country. Mm-hmm. And I didn't see it coming and I wasn't smart enough to think it up, but I'm sure glad it came along. And I've never had a more fulfilling job. I really haven't.
Mm-hmm. What kind of differences and similarities are there between being the governor of Indiana and the president of Purdue?
In both cases, I think, and this is really true of almost any position of broad responsibility, I think the essence of the job is to try to think about how the entity, whether it's a state, a university, a business, how it can go to a higher place, and to paint a picture of that for people. And try to get people, first try to have a sense of how you can leave the place better than you found it. We're in Cub Scouts, we were all taught, leave the campsite cleaner than you found it. And first to think hard about big things. I always thought it was a dereliction of duty to have a big job and just sort of tend the store, be a caretaker. That's part of it. But you really ought to be able to, I always said, answer the why question. Why am I going to do this? What's going to be bigger? What that really matters is going to be better if we can pull it off. And then to, as I say, describe that to people in a way that maybe gets them excited about it. And then, of course, try to get a lot of people moving in the same direction. I always used to say to my coworkers at the state, nothing big ever happens because of one person. It's only when a lot of talented people come together and aim at the same goal, and that big improvements occur. So I guess that's my outlook, and to me, that's very much the same in both places. I hope after this experience is over that Boilermakers will say that this was a good period for Purdue, that we moved ahead on some important fronts. That'll be the test.
Mm-hmm. Yep, no doubt. So just a couple more things. I know we're running close on time. I want to talk about tuition freeze. I had a couple of people ask me about that. They were curious about how you were able to do that, and how long do you think we'll be able to sustain that?
Yeah, well, these are frequent questions over the years. I'll start by saying that I had no idea at the beginning that we'd be able to run the string as long as we have. Mm-hmm. 8 years, and it will be at least 9. I guess the simplest answer that I've learned to give is we solve the equation for zero, by which I mean we start by saying, what would it take if your top priority was to hold the cost where it is, actually we've brought it down a little bit, room and board and so forth, have been cut a little bit. If that's your number one goal and you fix that, and treat everything else as variable, what else would you have to do? And if you start with that mentality, I don't want to say it's been easy, but it hasn't been nearly as difficult as people imagine it to be, or maybe I would have thought it was. The other thing is nothing is too small. And if you get lots of people involved, and if you can get enough people just stopping and asking themselves the question, is there a more efficient way to do this? Do we really need to be doing this at all? At the very beginning, Dub, I remember it was sort of a gimmick, but I said to people, we're going to create a student affordability fund. It's just an accounting device. But every time we save even a small amount of money, we're going to put it in that account so it doesn't get spent on something else. And I remember I said, just think of we talk in employment terms about full-time equivalents, FTEs. I said, think about STEs, student tuition equivalents. I said, every time we save $10,000, that's one student's whole year, in-state students' whole year.
Yeah.
So no amount is too small to think about. And so we've done a few big things that had multi-million-dollar effects, but the credit really goes to people across the university who have done a host of smaller things that have allowed us to keep spending from requiring tuition increases. And there's one other thing to say about it, and that is that the university has grown, and we know that one reason, not the only reason, but one reason that more and more students from everywhere have been coming here is affordability. They think it's a great value, a great education at a price that's lower than many of our competitors, and then they have brought their tuition dollars with them, so we've had more dollars to work with. So that's been I guess the sum of it. I do believe it's been a right thing to do, and it turned out to be a good thing from I'll call it a business standpoint.
It's great for the students' perspective too, I must say myself. So last thing I wanted to ask you, with your past in politics as the governor of Indiana, I know a lot of people, students specifically, said, "Hey, will Mitch Daniels ever run for president?" So I was wondering if you had ever considered that, or if that would be a possibility.
Well, there might have been a time for that, but there's an old cliche, timing's everything, and certainly in politics, if there was a time for that, it was toward the end of my last job, and I did think about it. There were an astonishing number and variety of people who I respected who brought the idea to me, and so I finally took it seriously. Decided it wasn't the right thing certainly not from a family standpoint, and haven't looked back. It's nice when somebody brings it up. My line around Purdue always is, look, at this point in life, I'm not taking the demotion.
Yeah.
Right. Like I got a better job. I held out and got a better job, and that's the way I look at the chance to work here at Purdue, and always will.
And then actually the last thing, my friend Drew Bargava, shout out to him. He wanted me to ask you this. We all know that you love going to the co-rec. So we were wondering what your favorite lift was to do at the co-rec.
Well, Drew, it's interesting. I've been doing this now for so many decades, running and some swimming and enough weightlifting to stay toned up. The thing is, over the course of time, it's gotten narrower and narrower because if I injure something, then I wind up stopping. So I'm really down to curls and lats. Pulling down.
Yeah.
Don't push up anymore. and then chest press stuff or push-ups where that's the only way to do it. But yeah, that's one thing about getting older. I mean, the range of things, I finally stopped running, so now it's a elliptical and a stationary bike. But that just, you can still find something to do. And that's kind of what I'm down to.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for not only coming on my podcast and getting your message out to the students of Purdue, but for everything that you've done for us. We're truly thankful to have you as the president.
Well, Dub, no need thanking me. I always say a person needn't be thanked for just doing what they were hired to do, but it has been a joy. Congratulations to you on this. Greetings to all the Hammer and Rails and other followers of Purdue sports. We'll do all we can to get back in play as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. Thank you so much.
Okay. See you.
Stay safe.